Depression kind of sucks. When you're depressed, people tell you that you're depressed, but no one seems to know how to not be depressed, and any advice people give you is cryptic and vague at best. I was depressed for about 15 years, but recently I feel like I've climbed out of it, and I want to share with you how I did that. And if you think this video is going to be helpful to you, why don't you hit that subscribe button so you can see when I upload more videos in the future that might also be helpful. Anyway, before we talk about getting over depression, I feel like we need to talk about what nihilism is. To help me with that, let me introduce someone. This is Kothbot. As a robot, we can have Kothbot think or do whatever we want. This lets us project personality traits we might find bad or offensive onto something that we can talk about without fear of vilifying an actual person. Today, let's say Kothbot is someone who acts and thinks just like a regular person. Like many people, he has a problem. He's not very happy. He sees that people often turn to religion for happiness, but Kothbot doesn't believe in a god. At least he doesn't see any evidence for one, so he has no reason to expect that one exists. He sees people praying to a god, and they seem to draw some kind of happiness from it, but he can't do that since in the back of his mind, he will always feel it's not real. But Kothbot has trouble finding any sort of meaning or happiness elsewhere too. If humans are just the product of random chance in a cold, mostly dead universe, it means there's no real meaning to their existence. Kothbot could carve out some kind of place for himself in the world and make enough money to survive, but that won't make his life have meaning on any sort of cosmic scale. Is there really even a point in surviving? Besides that, it seems a whole lot like the world is going to end soon anyway. It could be war, zombies, or some other catastrophe that no one saw coming. And nothing he has ever done or humanity has ever done will matter at that point. We'll all just be space dust. Kothbot has been crushed by nihilism. If you're watching this video, I suspect that you may have reached this point or something like it. And you're probably tired of being depressed all the time. And you're tired of being sad, or arguably worse, not feeling anything at all. But there doesn't seem to be an option to do anything about it. I think that Kothbot believes he can't be happy or his life can't have meaning because of his nihilistic beliefs. But what if that's only a mental trick? I don't think nihilism directly causes unhappiness. What nihilism does is make it hard to want to do anything. And I think what actually causes unhappiness is not doing anything. I think the very first step is understanding that you can be right about the world being a miserable place, but that doesn't mean you have to be unhappy. You can have a nihilistic view on the world and still feel good. As soon as you can convince yourself that you can feel good, you can start to try and figure out how to reach that point. This is the basis for everything, the absolute core, the thing that you grab onto when you're drowning, the indestructible foundation that all your other thoughts spring from. You can feel good. And meaning isn't just something optimistic people talk about but never reach. It's a real thing. If you want to be a little more scientific about it, think about it this way. Our brains are evolved for survival, and since we are social creatures, this includes survival in social situations too. When we do something that is beneficial for survival, like telling a joke that everyone likes, we get a release of neurotransmitters. We experience a little bit of joy or happiness. When we do something that isn't beneficial for us, we don't get that. And that way, we develop a sense of what things we should be doing to maximize our chances of survival. So if you aren't doing anything, you aren't going to feel good, and in fact you might even feel sad because on some level you know you could be doing something that makes you feel good. Still not convinced you should try to find happiness? Think about it like this. You are alive. You can do one of two things. Either you can be miserable, or you can try to find happiness. If nihilism tells you that it doesn't matter either way, why not choose the option that maximizes your happiness for the short time you're alive? Even if your life is meaningless on a grand cosmic scale, would you rather have a miserable meaningless life or a happy meaningless life? Maybe you struggle with not knowing what the path to happiness is. I think it's because the choice isn't always clear. You may not be aware that you are making that choice to be miserable. Often we think of choices as working toward goal 1 or goal 2, but in almost every scenario, there's a third choice that we don't really think about. and that is the choice to do nothing. Doing nothing almost always feels the worst of the three choices. So when you make a habit out of doing nothing, of course you're going to feel miserable all the time. When I choose to do nothing, it's because it's comfortable. It's easy to do nothing. Doing something is work, and it's hard to have motivation to work when you feel like it just doesn't matter. But if you understand that it's doing the something itself that makes you feel happiness, the act of doing something is what matters. Furthermore, when you start to make plans on how to feel better in the long term, you start to get this passive effect of happiness. Essentially, the concept of having a happier future motivates you to do work right now that you aren't exactly happy about. For me, it's school. I don't like going to school. However, I know that having the degree will give me an amount of satisfaction that makes the work I'm doing now worth it. The universe doesn't care that I have a degree, but I don't really care what the universe thinks. I'm doing it for personal happiness. So maybe you struggle with not knowing what sort of things you can do that will make you feel happy. Well, let's talk about that. Some people say that hard work is one of the most important things that you can do for the attainment of personal happiness. And that is certainly true. Just treating YouTube as a job has created a lot of happiness for me. Who would have ever thought that just working could make you happy? But I would say that alongside working itself, something just as important is developing a willingness to learn. There are a lot of hard workers who are unhappy and don't know why. They're always told that hard work leads to happiness and success, and they do work hard, but they haven't reached the state they were promised. I think sometimes it's because they're missing the willingness to learn. With hard work, you can achieve a lot, but they might not be the right things for you. They may in fact be things that end up making you more miserable. But if you have a willingness to learn, then every situation, every second of every day becomes this fascinating documentary about life. And you start to learn ways to increase your personal happiness. One thing I've noticed is that when I have a conversation with someone, when I have this willingness to learn, everything they say is interesting. They tell me their thoughts, and then I understand the world a little better. I start to understand why they do some of the things they do that I've always been confused or angry about. Then I'm not confused or angry about those things anymore. That in itself brings joy and happiness. And as it turns out, people really like to be listened to. Willingness to learn also means you can't be afraid of being wrong. In fact, you can learn to look forward to being wrong. When you're wrong and you find out you're wrong, you've learned something. You've grown smarter. You've grown more capable of reaching your goals. Maybe there's a problem in your life that is now easier to solve because you know more. This should be especially easy for you if you're a nihilist, because you probably believe that there is no objective truth. That means that no one is wrong, which in turn means every perspective is valid. It might not be factually true, but it gives you more information about other people's perspective on the world. If you understand that, you can discern what other people's goals and desires are. From an egocentric perspective, knowing someone's desires means you know how to sell them something. From an altruistic perspective, knowing people's desires means you can help them reach those goals. Isn't making friends, making money, and helping people better than telling people they're wrong and everyone just being angry about it? So no matter how you look at it, having a willingness to learn when talking to other people is beneficial to you. If you're really interested in this topic, there's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I really recommend everyone read it. So let's talk about what happens when you don't have a willingness to learn. There's actually a word for it. Arrogance. If you think you're always right, then anything anyone else says is wrong. There's no meaning in learning because you believe that you already know everything you need to know. You've stopped asking questions. You've stopped listening. Other people are unimportant because they can't give you anything new. Conversations are meaningless because you expect that you'll learn nothing. So having friends becomes kind of meaningless. Telling people they're wrong and criticizing them about it tends to reinforce behavior you didn't like in the first place, which they will now continue to do just to spite you. No wonder it always seems like arrogant people are unhappy and full of anger. I once had a friend who thought he was always right. He was pretty smart and well-read too. A lot more than most people. So because he was right more often than not, he thought he was right 100% of the time. What was life like for him? I played a lot of League of Legends with him, and I tended to watch a lot of videos about how to get better. One video I saw from gbay99 taught me about the principle of charity. That is, assume other people know what they are doing. My friend didn't really believe in this. When he played League of Legends, he would always talk about how other people were worse than him. If he saw an enemy player doing something like walking around with low health, he'd assume they were just a bad player and rush in for the kill. But many times, he was simply blundering into a trap. An enemy teammate would be waiting just outside of his sight and would ambush him. But he didn't see it as a trap. He believed that he was better than everyone else, so how could he fall into a trap? Instead of admitting he did something wrong, he blamed his teammates. "Where were you when I was in trouble?" he would say. It wasn't their fault, it was his, for falling into such an obvious trap. As you can probably guess, his teammates didn't much like that he would blame them for his own failings. It got to the point where I stopped playing with him because I didn't want to be yelled at for things I had little control over. To explain why he was stuck at the lowest rank possible, he made up some convoluted excuse about how the creators of the game were singling out his account specifically and keeping it that low. In other words, psychosis. But it made sense to him. That was the only logical explanation in his eyes. And because he believed that he could not be better due to some conspiracy against him, he never got better. The moral of the story is, if you think you're always right and everyone around you is just stupid and evil, you'll never learn from your mistakes. You'll make up insane stories to explain how things around you keep falling apart and why it's everyone else's fault. You'll keep making those same mistakes over and over, meanwhile driving everyone around you away. It's for this reason that I can say arrogance is the antithesis of happiness. There's a problem with arrogance in the American culture. We're told that it is a desirable trait to be confident, and that the definition of confidence is being sure you are right about something. But that's not confidence. That's the definition of arrogance. I think a better definition of confidence is knowing what you want. When I was in high school, I wasn't very confident. When I was asked what electives I wanted, I stumbled around verbally and ultimately gave the answer, "I don't know," or "I don't care, do whatever." Not a very confident response. And it led me taking classes that I wasn't at all interested in because I didn't know what I wanted. But when I signed up for college electives, it was different. At that point, I knew that I wanted to be a psychologist, a degree I'm still working on. I knew it brought me happiness just talking to people and learning about them, and it brought me happiness to help people discover what they can do to fix their problems. So I told the college counselor I wanted to take psychology classes as electives to prepare for my psychology degree. I felt confident, and it showed. Confidence also brings happiness. And the beautiful thing about this is that knowing what you want is one thing you can be sure about. No one knows you better than yourself, and at the same time, you can still be open to learning different or better ways of obtaining what you want. And you might find that what you thought you wanted will shift over time once you have a better understanding of the steps required to get there, or just more knowledge of the topic. The main difficulty then becomes knowing what you want. I can't really tell you what you want, but maybe it's not that hard to figure out. Maybe it's that something that everyone tells you is a weird obsession. Maybe it's that thing you spend all your free time thinking about. What if being happy and successful is as easy as just finding a way to make money doing that? I know a kid who wants to be a samurai. Unfortunately, samurai don't get a lot of work these days. But his obsession with samurai is still worth pursuing. Maybe he could write books about samurai. Maybe he could draw them or make cartoons. If he's interested in Japanese history, maybe he could become some kind of historian or a history teacher. Or while pursuing these things, he might find that it's not being a samurai specifically that he wants, but it's instead a desire to be a hero of some sort, and he doesn't mind risking his life to do so. Well, then maybe the military would be a good option for him. Maybe he just likes fighting, in which case there are plenty of combat sports he could get involved in. If you're open to it, you'll find there are 1,000 ways to take whatever weird thing you're into and turn it into a skill. Learn more about your passion. Read everything there is to know about it. Just learning about the thing you already like can bring you happiness. It all comes back to a willingness to do something and a willingness to learn how to do it better. That road not only leads to happiness, but to success as well. These are all ways that I found pieces of happiness, and I found that having just a little motivates me to do more. But I had to take that first step and actually try to do something. I had to step into the unknown a little and deal with anxiety and the fear that came with it. But it's not just about blindly taking risks. You have to make a plan. Write down where you are now and where you want to be, then fill in the steps between. Find a realistic way to get from step 1 to step 2, and then from step 2 to 3, and so on. Sometimes things will happen that get in your way, but once again, if you have a willingness to learn, you can find ways around them. And just making a plan in itself can bring hope. And hope brings happiness too. So, I see you stayed past the credits. Well, welcome to the after credits ending. Type ACE in the comments if you want to confuse people. Let's talk about luck. People say that being successful or being happy is about being lucky. It's about having an opportunity fall into your lap. I disagree. I think luck is an illusion. I think opportunities are always around you, and it's sometimes hard to see them because you get too focused on reaching a goal in a very specific way. Or maybe you're just too arrogant to see the value in opportunities others are offering you. If you are sufficiently willing to learn, you'll probably never get lucky. You'll be better than lucky because you'll see opportunities from a mile away, even before they have a chance to randomly cross you. I feel this way because some of the most successful people I've spoken to also consider themselves the least lucky. They had to work for everything. They sought out opportunities instead of waiting for one to come to them. I guess my point is that blaming lack of luck for lack of success is kind of a waste of energy and doesn't actually help you. Instead, seek out opportunities. Seek out things that you feel like you'd be lucky for having if they came to you. It's something to think about. Anyway, I'll see you next time.